Hi, today I would like to talk about the effects of inflation on the engineering industry.
Inflation is the increase in the general price level. So, for inflation to happen, the prices for several goods and services like clothes, food grains, fuel, transport must increase. So what is inflation? Inflation is a fall in the purchasing power of money. This is equivalent to a sustained increase in the general level of prices. Inflation occurs because the value of the currency has gone down over time. The change in money value over time needs to be considered to compare purchasing power over time. The economists generally agree that these are the causes of inflation. So first is money supply. Too much currency in the system tends to devalue them. Second, exchange rates. Domestic prices may be raised by international companies to compensate for profits reduced in other markets if the money weakens in some outside markets. So third will be cost push inflation. Producers of goods and services push increasing operating costs along to the customers through higher prices. So the last will be demand pull inflation. If demand for goods and services well exceeds supply, free spending by customers, the prices will be rise. The effects of inflation are wide-ranging, including not only individuals but also businesses and even countries. Here are some ways in which inflation affects procurement. First is consumer purchasing and second will be investment. For consumer purchasing, this is the most obvious impact to businesses. There are ways for businesses to plan for inflation to reduce the chances of revenue loss. Gradually increasing prices will prevent a sudden price hike. And if your competitors do not respond similarly, they will have to increase their own prices suddenly, which will cause sticker shock for their consumers, causing them to look for more affordable alternatives. Another sneakier option that businesses often resort to is to shrink the package size while keeping the price the same. This is sort of stealth inflation because most consumers will not notice the quantity change because they are more focused on price. The next is investment. For businesses hit hard by high inflation, upgrading outdated electronics and equipment becomes impossible. The office might benefit from a new computer and a remodel might appear to customers, but those kinds of upgrades are not going to be possible. Not only are profits low, but high inflation makes even normal, everyday costs expensive. High inflation stymies major investment. When inflation rises materially above the federal targets, investor confidence in the economy is reduced. This causes punitive interest rates on loans as investors seek a return on their investments. This is because they want to compensation for the increased risk of lending money. In the long term, this reduces business growth, preventing businesses from taking advantages of marketing opportunities. So next will be the effects of inflation on inventory. Rapidly rising prices not only affect the price consumers pay, they also affect the cost businesses have to pay for materials and inventory. When replacement inventory costs more than the inventory you just sold, it can lead to inventory shortages. In the highly inflationary 1970s, rising inventory costs led many US companies to adopt the Japanese model of just-in-time inventory management, which is JIT, as opposed to just-in-case inventory management, so they wouldn't have to stock so much inventory. Toyota is said to have been one of the ones to use JIT. Toyota started with just-in-time inventory controls in the 1970s, and it took more than 15 years to perfect. Toyota sends off orders for parts only when it receives news orders from customers. This requires precise timing and reliable inventory channels, since a single delay could halt production altogether. JIT allows companies to stock less inventory, thus saving on carrying costs, but even the most prudent business management may not be able to overcome the effects of high inflation. JIT is also useful in times of deflation when prices are falling, as happens frequently in the electronics industry. In that case, you do not want to carry inventory in stocks which, if held too long, you might have to sell at or below cost. So next will be the effects of inflation on operations and maintenance. While this proposed process will be tie O&M funding requests to the estimate actual cost of a facility, it will require additional funding consideration for the components of O&M costs that increase over time due to inflation. Non-DFCM institutions and agencies do not currently have the benefit of annual legislative adjustments to existing O&M funding amounts. O&M expenditures fluctuated over the life of the facilities and, in the case of goods and services, generally increase annually due to inflation. As the legislature considers this new process of requiring agencies and institutions to use actual facility costs for O&M in the determining funding needs, the State Buildings Board requests consideration of adjusting O&M annually for inflation to be consistent with that current practice for DFCM managed facilities. For the effects of inflation on manufacturing, there are two types of inflations, which is demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. Both of them cause an increase in the price level. Demand pull inflation occurs when the aggregate demand is much higher than the economy's productions. This means that the consumer have more money to spend than usual. They are demanding more goods, but in the short run, the production remains more or less constant. Therefore, the prices are pushed up. Cost push inflation occurs when the prices of factors of productions like wages, raw material, fuel, and power increase. This makes cost of production expensive, which in turn affects the supply. The supply reduces and the prices go up. So, inflation in its true essence is increase in prices. The prices of factor of production will also increase with inflation. For instance, an economy has inflation. The wages of workers have been the same. The prices of goods and services will have increased, and the workers are not able to afford all that they could afford before. That mount pressure on the producer to increase their wages.
Okay, so this concludes our presentation for assignment 2. Thank you.